What's up, y'all? Talon here. Today we're going to be covering the results from one of the biggest grassroots tournaments most likely to occur before the World Championship in August, the Victory Road to Honolulu Tour. This is a big cash prize tour with a, I believe it was a $2,000 pot, $1,000 going to first, and then trickling down to the rest of the top 8. It's definitely a great service provided to the community and a really good testing ground for people testing teams for the World Championship. So a lot of really cool innovations in the metagame, and also some very out there teams that have been put on people's radars. So definitely might be startling for some people, but also just good to get everything out in the open so that we don't have a full 2 months between the previous official largest tournament, the North American International Championships, and the World Championships. So if you enjoy these type of coverages of the results, my competitive analysis, I got top 32 at the North American International Championships myself a few months ago, or I guess a month ago. So if you enjoy my analysis, if you enjoy these type of videos, please subscribe to the channel. And with all that being said, let's hop into the analysis now. So looking at the teams in the top 8, you can see the top 6 here. Now you can also see 7 and 8. I'm just gonna go over basically the restricted breakdown first off, just so that I think that's pretty important. Just looking beyond the the first place, second place, etc. team, we're gonna go into details on those. But I think looking at the restricted trends in this day 2 of a format that's exactly the same as the World Championship, that I believe 8-round plus 2 format is going to be really interesting. So first off, we only have one Calyrex-Ice in the top 8. The Kyogre finished in 3 of the top 8 slots, and Kyogre is definitely not a, it's tied with Miraidon for 3 in the top 8 slot, and then a Calyrex Shadow Rider, and then a Miraidon. I think Calyrex Shadow Rider and Calyrex-Ice is probably what we were expecting to be seeing doing a bit better. So yeah, very interesting to see the Kyogre get 3 of the top 8 slots. That's definitely not something I was expecting, and definitely the second place team is going to be very interesting to go into. Fede Campo, I believe, got top 4 at the World Championship with a Trick Room team last year, so definitely in his wheelhouse and definitely playing it to the best of his ability for a big cash out of about $1,000. But looking into that team, so Calyrex-Ice, Rillaboom, Urshifu, Farigiraf, Raging Bolt, it's pretty similar to some of the earlier Calyrex-Ice compositions, but the Ogerpon Cornerstone, definitely the standout. I've been seeing a bit of that pop up. I think people are realizing that Among Us, unless you're really a diehard Among Us player, it's not that good. For example, Patrick Connors winning the North American International Championships with Rillaboom as his grass-type supporter. Fede now has the Rillaboom and the Ogerpon, I guess kind of replacing the Pelipper or the Incineroar, depending on which way you look at it, but the more traditional balance components of the Calyrex-Ice Rider teams kind of falling off as people basically prep their counterplay to beat those. So that's definitely something to be on the lookout for the World Championship. Is you do still need to handle the offensive set pieces in Calyrex-Ice, Urshifu, and Raging Bolt, but you have to be more flexible in your game plans to not just be targeting Incineroar and Among Us, but also things like Ogerpon Cornerstone, which can deal with opposing Incineroars, hitting them with Ice Cold or Ivy Cudgels. If you aren't intimidated for a knockout, going for a Tera Rock to maybe even knock them out, even if you are. And then just dealing with basically things that are trying to ignore a Rage Powder. You can follow me that away. So there's a lot of really cool things about this. And then the Farigiraf able to block the priority, people trying to stop you from, taking advantage of your Trick Room turns by Fake Out Cycling. Farigiraf covers for that very well. And then the Throat Spray Hyper Voice Shadow Ball set, very effective against things like Calyrex Shadow Rider, which are traditionally very strong against Calyrex-Ice Rider. I think this was a good call from Fede. Just replacing the Incineroar and Among Us is basically covering for a lot of the anti-Calyrex-Ice options and just like basically getting ahead of that. So really strong team. Congrats to the first place finish on him, and we'll move into the rest of the teams now. Moving from Fede to the second place player, Marlo. And so Kyogre combinations, as we've seen them, we've seen pretty defensive ones doing very well. The more offensive, hyper-offensive Kyogre teams haven't done that well, haven't been able to go deep in larger tournaments. This is, I think, one of the more recent instances of it doing so, and Marlo did so with a very, very interesting team. Congrats to him. He has a lot of crazy options here, but definitely all of them have their, they're not coming out of nowhere. They're definitely all very deliberate. He was able to pilot an unconventional team against a very strong field, and definitely prove himself as someone to be looking out for in the World Championships if he has qualified, and if not, in the rest of the season for 2025. So looking at the team itself, it is a Kyogre with Choice Scarf. We've seen a lot of Choice specs. Assault Vest has become the most dominant item. We've seen Leftovers, Calm Mind have a surge basically because of its first place finish in the Battle Stadium ladder last season, but this one is a very offensive Choice Scarf one, accented by a Serena with Queenly Majesty and Helping Hand, so you can't lead Fake Out and just deal with the Kyogre or Grassy Glide it. That's why you are Terra Water, because you don't have to go Terra Fire or Terra Grass to resist a Grassy Glide when you have Serena in the back. Also to protect the Kyogre is the Electabuzz with Eviolite. It did get top 12 at the North American International Championship on a Trick Room team, but this is a very different take on it. where we had Volt Switch and Taunt before, now we have Thunder and Protect. Thunder hitting very hard in rain is also having the option to, or the potential to paralyze Pokemon that you're not going to be relying on, but if you get a free turn for Electabuzz where you're not fainting or Follow-Meing, that can be really nice as well. So I think the general focus of the Electabuzz and the Serena are to get the Kyogre in a position, whether you're in Tailwind or not, to where you're just completely safe the Kyogre with the 2-go-4 Tera Water, Water Spouts with either Helping Hand or Faint Support if the opponent has Protect, to wipe out entire boards. Rillaboom, Tera Ground is something we've seen a little bit of, but can just get a bit of a damage edge on things like Raging Bolt, which can otherwise be a wall for your Kyogre that's a bit difficult to deal with. Tera Ice on Serena, similarly with Triple Axle, does a lot of damage to Raging Bolt, taking the one at KO if you go for Tera Ice, I believe, and also still having the resistance against Calyrex-Ice. Tera Flying is actually kind of interesting because your Focus Sash, you're probably going max speed, max special attack, so if you are able to go for the Tera Flying, you're doing a ton of damage that way. But the Archaludon is definitely something that a lot of people were looking sideways at, and that's because it is holding the safety goggles and has the Stalwart ability. So Stalwart is, you might not know what it does. Basically, Archaludon has 3 really good abilities. Usually you don't see Stalwart because the other 2 take precedence. The Stamina means every time you're getting hit, you get a defense boost, very generally good utility. Sturdy means it's basically a embedded Focus Sash, so that's really appreciated. You can run something like Power Herb Electro Shot and basically take advantage of Sturdy to guaranteed. Survive a hit and go very offensive. This one is Stalwart Safety Goggles, Stalwart able to ignore any Follow Me or Rage Powder, so that might seem like it's counterintuitive with Safety Goggles, but it actually makes a lot of sense. So basically this makes your matchup into Smeargle plus Calyrex-Ice, which was a team that's definitely been popping up as very difficult to deal with. There's even one in this top cut. Basically, if you go for Tera Ghost on the Archaludon against Smeargle Calyrex-Ice, you can ignore Follow Me with Stalwart. You can't get Spored with Safety Goggles, and they can't fake you out with Tera Ghost, so you're able to freely go for an Electro Shot or a Steel Beam into the Calyrex slot and take a KO. You also have Kyogre, which can kind of just threaten things with a Water Spout. The Tera Ghost is also really effective again if they lead the Annihilate, which they sort of have to do. A lot of the times, these teams' answers to Kyogre is just lead the Annihilate and basically Final Gambit it, but you're running Choice Scarf Kyogre, you might be timid to even outspeed and knock out, or basically chip the Annihilate down with Water Spout before they can Final Gambit you for a lot of damage. So if they lead the Annihilate, you have Water Spout Kyogre to deal with that. You can also Tera Ghost away from the Final Gambit, and then if they lead the Smeargle, you can go for a Electro Shot or Draco Meteor or Steel Beam into the Calyrex-Ice Rider. Usually they'll just go for the Tera Fire, but burning that Tera in itself is pretty appreciated. And then they can fake out the Kyogre, that's definitely an option. But if you read that and they go for Tera Fire in front of your Archaludon, threatening a knockout with Steel Beam, switch into Serena, Water Spout, take a KO, GG. Yeah, it's a very devastating combo. I can definitely see what they're going for on the Archaludon. Once again, congrats to Marlo on this finish. Very, very innovative team. I'm excited to see how it, if anyone takes it up for the World Championship. It's definitely very hyper offensive. I know a lot of players appreciate that, don't want to play the very pivot heavy metagame that we are in right now. So any opportunity to opt out, I think a lot of people might be hopping onto this team. So congrats to Marlo, and we'll go into the rest of the teams now. I'm going to look at the 3, 4, and 5 teams kind of in conjunction, just because I think they have some similarities, but they're really representative of the Miraidon teams that we're likely to see at the World Championships. This team is similar in composition to what we were seeing earlier in the season with the Choice Scarf, Tera Ground Chi-Yu, plus the Tornadus instead of the Whimsicott, and then an offensive Urshifu. This one's Choice Band, Tera Water. We've also seen Focus Sash with the Tera Dark. But yeah, generally this is one of the more common compositions. We also see a pretty similar one that I believe was innovated on. Usually we saw the Scarf Chi-Yu, but again, the Whimsicott, the Urshifu. A lot of people have been pivoting to the Ogerpon Fire. But interestingly enough, this one is now the Tera Fairy Miraidon. But we saw a lot of that early season before Rajan Ball's victory in the first regional with Miraidon, just opting for the Tera Electric. But we're kind of opting in the opposite direction, going for the more generally bulky and basically solid defensive Tera type of the Tera Fairy, as people have adapted to the Tera Electric and are basically finding options on the team. You can't just run people over as easily with the Tera Electric. So yeah, just interesting innovation there. And then the kind of middle ground team with no Tailwind, where they're basically just trying to bulk up with the Grimmsnarl screens, Thunderwave, etc., and then go in Trick Room a bit more often. As I had mentioned, this is the Tera Fairy set. Basically, Tera Fairy Choice Specs Hadron Engine boosted Dazzling Gleam is hitting very, very hard. It's kind of just Tapu Koko. I kind of want to say Tapu Koko light because you have to Terry to get the Fairy boost, but really you're hitting way harder than Tapu Koko ever was. Beyond that, pretty standard on the Chi-Yu, Tera Ground. You can't go for Discharge on this team, but this is kind of just to wipe out things like Iron Hands and other Miraidon that would otherwise be kind of uncomfortable to play against. And then you have Tailwind plus Urshifu Choice Band. That's really annoying, especially with Rain Dance. You can go for really crazy strong Aqua Jets or Surging Strikes and just take knockouts as people try to prep for the Miraidon, bring ground types in. The Urshifu obviously handles that very well. Then Iron Hands with Quark Drive healing or dealing a ton of damage with Quark Drive boosted attack, Drain Punches, Wild Charges, and Heavy Slams. Tera Poison is interesting. We don't really see a lot of Fairy coverage in this metagame. I guess the increase in Miraidons going for that could be influencing that, but yeah, overall pretty standard take on the team relative to what we've been seeing online, except for the Urshifu Choice Band. I think that's kind of new innovation, something to watch out for, definitely. So the last team was the 3rd place team. This is now the 4th place team by Frederick Hoj Nilsson. As I said, the Grimmsnarl with the Reflect, Light Screen, Thunderwave, Foul Play. Foul Play generally very strong against Calyrex-Ice, and then also Foul Play, Electric Seed for Rigorath. That's definitely a very, very bad matchup against Calyrex-Ice, I'd imagine. This one is a Tera Fairy one. Yeah, it looks like another Tera Fairy. So they might all have been that terrestrialization type in the top 8. That's very notable. Just people moving off of Tera Electric is something you can kind of, take advantage of in team building. Maybe the people prepping so hard for the Tera Electric can kind of like ease up on that, but then people who go Tera Electric will take advantage of it. So it's definitely a give and take game, but a lot of the Tera Fairy ones did better this tournament, so that's definitely something to be aware of. I think the Choice Band Entei, you do have the Tera Normal just for general utility with the extreme speed, but it's really here to handle Rillaboom. With Inner Focus, you can't be Fake Outed. Grassy Glide, Fake Out, U-Turn, not really good coverage in Entei. You can knock out right back with Sacred Fire. So if they try and switch in on your Electric Train or Elite It and try to stop you from getting an early advantage with your Electric Train, you can just knock them out with Sacred Fire, as well as being able to knock out Amoonguss. These are just Miraidon's enemy number 1, so having the option to handle those early in the battle is very appreciated. This last team by Ko Tsukaide, I believe the 2019 Senior World Championship, very strong player, Hiyobari on Twitter. I think went 8-0 in the first day of competition, but yeah, very honestly conventional team in some respects. The Whimsicott, Urshifu, Farigiraf, Iron Hands are pretty unchanged from a very common Miraidon composition. We do see, again, the move away from Tera Electric to Tera Fairy here. And then the Ogerpon is kind of the standout. Basically, Ivy Cudgel, Tera Fire, very threatening to Rillaboom, as well as Amoonguss, which, same vein as Entei, just trying to deal with those Pokemon proactively on lead. And Ogerpon Heart Flame is very successful at doing that. Maybe a little worse than, I guess, Entei, because you can intimidate the Ogerpon, but if someone's bringing like an Incineroar against Miraidon, that's generally pretty favored because you can knock that out very easily with Electro Drift or Volt Switch. Although I guess you can't get it with Volt Switch when you are not Tera Electric, but yeah, just worth mentioning the Fire type, very common on these teams to deal with those Pokemon. So essentially these 3 Miraidon teams I feel are very representative of what we might see as the main types of Miraidon teams at the World Championship. This kind of more standard one, maybe with the Choice Band Rapid Strike Urshifu instead of the Single Strike that we saw a bit earlier on with the Focus Sash. A more balanced composition with a Tera Fairy Miraidon and an Ogerpon offering its own offense, and then again the Single Strike Focus Sash set here, and then the Grimmsnarl variant without Tailwind, and focusing more on the bulk of the Trick Room mode and just like bulking up your Miraidon, which has amazing stats, and making your Miraidon, Iron Hands, and the rest of your sweepers very difficult to KO, even if they're not necessarily moving. Looking at Oliver Ramsey's team, it is kind of similar to a lot of the Calyrex Shadow Rider teams we've seen before. I don't want to go into too much detail. This is Citrus Berry Tera Normal Calyrex, get the edge in the mirror with the Tera Normal, and then Psychic moves to deal with Amoonguss, which can otherwise be kind of annoying. Urshifu is Focus Sash Taunt, and then beyond that it's a pretty standard team, but generally just Calyrex Shadow Rider balanced stuff, trying to set up with Nasty Plot and use your Fake Out and Follow Me to basically outplay opponents over a slow grindy game and then just kind of sweep late game with your boosted up Calyrex. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we have Robbie. I believe got second at Worlds last year in the senior division with a very interesting take on Koraidon here. Very, very different than what we've seen. I believe he's been using this in a lot of grassroots tournaments. Got maybe top 4 in the St. Jude charity tournament, which was another large grassroots tournament with no prize money for charity. But yeah, definitely showing that he's very serious about this team, bringing it to a high cash prize tour here, and let's go into the details of that. So looking at the Koraidon, it's very standard Collision Course, Flare Blitz, Flame Charge with the Tera Fire set. You might expect this to be a little bit bulky. I'm not entirely sure. We do have the Trick Room mode, but we also have a fast mode with Chi-Yu and Venusaur. Speaking of Venusaur, honestly, there's a lot of weird stuff on this team. Weird in that it's not very typical, not in that it's bad. Venusaur, I might be inclined to say it might be a little bad, but if you're hitting your Sleep Powders, it's very good. It's definitely very threatening in team preview at least. Porygon 2 and Ursaluna give a bit more consistency to the team, grounding it with the Trick Room mode. Assault Vest, Raging Bolt is definitely just a very bulky team. Deceptively so. You have the very frail Venusaur and Chi-Yu, but you have Focus Sash on that, so it's going to be kind of hard to knock out. And then Miraidon has a lot of natural bulk. P2 plus Ursaluna, very, very difficult to knock out, especially when you have Recover on the P2. I think this team might actually be... Basically, Miraidon's weakest matchup generally is Calyrex-Ice, in my opinion. And with the Porygon 2, you can control Trick Room very well. Chi-Yu is able to hit it for a lot of damage with Heat Wave or Dark Pulse. Raging Bolt is able to Volt Switch out and basically position your team really well. And then Ursaluna with Substitute and Flame Orb, able to deal with Intimidate and Spores very easily with the Burn and the Substitute. And basically, if you can control the Trick Room with Porygon 2 and get the Ursaluna in position, it's going to be really difficult for your opponents to beat you. You have the Sun mode to deal with the Pelipper and Urshifu on these teams for your Ursaluna and Raging Bolt. So yeah, just a very, very strong team. So pretty cool to see Robbie continuing to do very well in grassroots tournaments leading up into the World Championship with a lot of components that no one else is really experimenting with, namely the Venusaur, Porygon 2, and Ursaluna. So congrats to him. I'm looking forward to his finish in seniors this year. The last team in the top 8 is Yuki Shimizu with again a Kyogre team, very hyper offensive, but a little bit different than the one that got second place. Definitely not as unconventional as having an Electabuzz on it, but looking into it, we have what looks pretty similar to some of the earlier Kyogre teams, basically another Tornadus Kyogre team, this one with Goldango, not Choice Specs, but Nasty Plot, Leftovers, Terra Normal, kind of a decent check against something like a Calyrex-Ice or a Calyrex Shadow Rider. I think Kyogre teams generally fare pretty well into that, but I digress. Rillaboom, very consistent, of course, with the Kyogre. Lime for Fake Out Pins, healing with the Grassy Terrain to get your Water Spouts up to full power, and then a Life Orb Urshifu, very strong, very overpowering. And then for a Graph, basically trying to block any Grassy Glides to not have to force a Terastallization on your Kyogre is definitely very smart, as well as just being a solid option into Calyrex Shadow Rider once again. Looking briefly at the rest of the teams, this Kyogre team is one of the more common ones. It got first place, I believe. Jungso Lee is Crystal, basically the player who got #1 on ladder with this exact Kyogre team, Calm Mind, Origin Pulse, Ice Beam, Leftovers. Very uncommon set, but piloted to first on Battle Stadium, and I believe he also got they got third, maybe fourth place on ladder on 2 carts, first place and third or fourth, so really consistent team. If you're hitting your Origin Pulses and you're able to consistently go for Calm Minds to increase your longevity, so you can actually go for many attempts. You have double Fake Out, Screens, Thunder Wave, Spore, Rage Powder, Pollen Puff to effectively just give yourself as many opportunities to set up Calm Minds and hit Origin Pulses as possible. So going 9-1 in the first day of competition before falling in top 16, definitely a team to be on the lookout for the World Championship. And then yeah, we have Zine, the World Championship, using a pretty standard composition of Calyrex Shadow Rider. Again, the Fake Out Core, we have a Mienshao Fake Out. Basically, this composition overall is pretty standard. Usually we'll see a Covert Cloak Chi-Yu, but opting for a more offensive Pokemon, if you can believe it, over Chi-Yu with, a different support option in the Follow Me instead of Taunt Covert Cloak. So interesting there. And then we have a offensive Calyrex Shadow Rider team with Tailwind, not much to go into here. Another repeat of Crystal's team. Basically this 13th place team, very strong Electabuzz team that got 12th place. The Vital Spirit Follow Me Electabuzz having a repeat, also got second place in this tournament, so definitely a huge turn up in recent months. But overall a pretty standard team at this point. A lot of people have been spamming this in Limitless Tours and getting familiar with it just because it is such an impressive hard Trick Room team. So yeah, definitely something to be on the lookout for this or similar compositions. So Miraidon with Aepo, I believe this player has also, in the first tournament, first large Victory Road tournament, they also had a similar performance with the Tailwind Snarl Suicune, I want to believe. So just kind of getting continued reps in and just getting very good with this team and able to pilot it to a strong top 16 here. And then the last team is a fairly standard Calyrex Ice Rider team, except with a Smeargle over what is usually an Amoonguss or a Pelipper. So overall, not too crazy. We have been seeing a bit of that pop up, a bit bulkier of a Smeargle or a faster one to either live a Surging Strikes or outspeed stuff and go for Spore. So that is going to do it for my coverage of this tournament. There's a lot of usage stats, and we have actually the rest of the day 2 teams on the page. So if you want to check that out and go a little bit more in depth for yourself, I have that linked in the description below. If you enjoy these type of videos, please subscribe to the channel. Trying to do a lot more, just cover a lot of the Limitless Tours, in general, larger grassroots before the World Championship, trying to keep a bead on the metagame. If you want to stay tuned for that, please subscribe. And yeah, with all that being said, peace y'all.